Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton King. We're on part 38. We're starting a new band today. Before we start, this week I've been mostly listening to this album by Thomas Paine, the guy from Nightwish, and it's a concept album about Scrooge McDuck, which is really cool. I really like it. It's recommended. Have you been listening to anything this week?
Yeah, I listened to Freak Out by Frank Zappa. I don't really know what to make of it. Lots of parody in there, and I'm not sure how I feel about parody music.
So today, I don't know whether you've spotted down here or anything, but we are doing Bruce Dickinson, and this is Tattooed Millionaire. The significant thing about this album, does it count as his first solo album? And I was umming and ahhing and kept changing my mind whether we would include it or not. I decided we would include it because there's lots to talk about and it's interesting. Cast your minds back to 1984. It was a dark night. On the Power Slave tour, things had got a bit out of hand. Maiden were getting big, touring an enormous amount. This was in the middle of the 80s, so they were a strange band. They were kind of a 70s band in the 80s, and they had no TV at all, no radio play, and they were massively successful on word of mouth, and they were becoming successful all over the world, so they were having to tour 6 days a week, driving them all mad. It supposedly affected Bruce Dickinson more than the other members of the band, possibly because he's the singer. I think probably affected his performance, being such a demanding songs. It was around that time that he did actually think of leaving the band, but he didn't leave the band. He did do a little collaboration with Jimmy Bain from Rainbow and did some never released demos. So that's interesting. But as far as I know, they're not available on bootleg or anything. Supposedly sort of Procol Harum kind of stuff, which shows that if he was going to do anything, it was going to be not like Maiden. Now the thing about those first three albums he did with Maiden is that they're all much the same. You can mix those songs up and they would fit together in any order. The only thing that really differentiates them is the production. So Bruce came along to the next album thinking he was going to, now they've got to make their physical graffiti, they've got to do the next stage, the next thing. So he played the stuff he'd written to Steve Harris, and the answer was no, that doesn't sound like Iron Maiden. We need to make another Iron Maiden album. So they did, and they continuously. And although that album isn't considered their best, it's got my favourite song on it, which is Alexander the Great. And the following album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, I think that's their best album. Fantastic concept album in the 80s. It's fantastic. And it was after this period where they had a bit of time off. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 was being made, and they asked Steve Harris to provide a track. Steve Harris was busy making the Made in England live video, so he wasn't free. So I think Rod Smallwood asked Bruce Dickinson, and he said, yes, I've got a song. Of course he didn't. So in 5 minutes he wrote Bring Your Daughters to the Slaughter, fitting for Nightmare on Elm Street. And of course, so the record company get back to him once they've heard it and go, oh my god, this is amazing, you've got any more stuff like this? And he goes, yes, I've written lots of songs, because he hadn't written anything. And they're offering him ridiculous amounts of money to do this. So he rings up Yannick Gers and says, well, who apparently was going to quit music. He was going to sell his equipment, and that was going to be the end of it. But he rang him up and he basically said these idiots are going to give him tons of money to make an album. Yannick Gers obviously quite reasonably says, but we haven't got an album. And he says, well, let's make one. We'll do a song that sounds like Aerosmith, a song that sounds like AC/DC, a sort of pop song. They want one that sounds like the Stones. So they did. In 11 days, they wrote an album. So for that reason, it is not typical Bruce Dickinson. His contribution to Iron Maiden was always sort of existential or about religion and that kind of stuff. So it certainly wasn't what people were expecting. So that's interesting. Now, of course, Bring Your Daughters to the Slaughter didn't end up on the album, I think, to its demerit. So the resulting album, which is popular, people like it. Predictably, there's a couple of good songs on there, but there is an enormous amount of filler on there, probably 60% filler. Really, he does say, in defence of the album, whilst there's about 3 tracks on there that are good, it was just as good as everything else that was around at the time, which is true. There wasn't much good around at the time. If you think Guns N' Roses, which isn't stylistically all that different to this, the weaker songs of Guns N' Roses aren't really any better than the filler on this. Except this was written in 11 days. That's allowed. It's okay. Bring Your Daughters to the Slaughter, of course, ended up on the next album, No Prayer for the Dying, which I think is a disappointing Maiden album. Didn't compare to Seventh Son. It's still good. But it's interesting that rather than being the best stuff being Steve Harris's contributions, the best stuff on there, Bruce either wrote or contributed to. So yeah, what about the album? What do you think of it?
It is a collection of pretty mediocre hard rock / heavy metal songs. A bit easier on the ear than Iron Maiden, I'd say.
Yeah, more melodic, more sort of AC/DC kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's the kind of stuff that you'd put on, say, in the background when you're doing something, just to fill a bit of space. The real problem with the album, or the danger with the album, is that, Iron Maiden actually have quite a bit of integrity in the sense that they hadn't sold out and they were doing something that wasn't massively popular or wouldn't be considered popular at the time, but being successful. And there's a danger with producing an album like this. You might sacrifice some of that simply through the Bruce Dickinson sort of link.
I think because of the time, rock music was not in a good place. This was perfectly acceptable.
I think that the general consensus is, as you say, that there's a couple of good songs on there. It tends to be front-loaded. You get the better songs earlier.
Massively.
I actually slightly waver from that. Slightly. I agree, but with a twist. In isolation, it's not something that I'd think we would review normally. Interesting in the run of albums that we're going to do. Right, song number 1, Son of a Gun.
This is great. I think this is a great song. Lyrics are good. Simultaneously attacking religion and the pro-gun lobby story about a preacher who rules with a gun, forced people to be religious. Very typically Bruce Dickinson riff, certainly a relative of Revelations from Peace of Mind. And it's also got the staple of Yannick Gers on there as well. He obviously played a part in that because the arpeggios at the start, Yannick used those again. It's certainly his trademark of writing.
It's a reasonably good rock song. I don't think it gets much better than this on the album.
That's the problem. That's the best song on the album. Yeah. I have to say, live versions from the mid-90s are better because his voice is better. And also I think performed live without the production of the time helps it tremendously. A lot of it's the production makes it sound like that. I think if it was recorded in 1980 with a much rougher but sort of purer production that's just recording the sound of the band, it would come out better.
Track 2.
Tattooed Millionaire. This was the second single, certainly the single. This was the song, most poppy song. It's a great tune, actually. It's obviously about hairbands, and supposedly specifically about the guy from Motley Crue who slept with his wife, left his wife. At the time, the thing he kept saying was that he doesn't have any tattoos and he's not a millionaire. He probably is a millionaire now.
It does come across as a bit of a self-parody, but obviously...
That's the thing, that's what's so interesting. It's not a self-parody. It's not about... Because, as far as it's concerned, it's nothing to do with hairband. They're very critical of hairbands, Ryan May and people like that. It's only in retrospect because of the time, it feels like everybody was like that.
It does sound like a hairband song.
Yeah.
The LA influence is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's a parody of it, yeah. It's probably best of that kind of music you're going to hear, to be honest. It's so interesting doing this after doing Nevermind. It's fascinating. Now, most people would say, well, look what rock music was like at the time. It was all a bit meh. You needed a kick up the arse. But really, Nevermind is just as generic as this. The real difference is in what they've taken out. And really, you could argue, well, you're going from this to Nevermind, which is a whole different argument, really just dumbing down.
I don't like this track. It's too generic for me. It's it may be parody, as I was saying earlier about the Frank Zappa stuff. I'm not sure how I feel about parody music. Track 3.
Born in 58. I quite like this. My list of the 3 best songs on here are tracks 1, 2 and 3. Bruce doesn't list it, very interestingly. It's the thing about being personal in his lyrics was something he developed later. And here this is kind of a nostalgic. It's deliberately nostalgic and deliberately innocent. Got some nice playing. It is bland, but a couple of good lyrics in there as well.
I think the fact that it is slightly personal raises it a bit. I think it only raises it to sort of just above tepid.
Just there. Well, I like it. I don't know why I like it, but I like it. Nothing sacred but the one square mile. Next track.
Hell on Wheels.
I have nothing to say about this track.
I just think AC/DC, but not as good.
It's actually got a song called Hell on Wheels. I think that's the worst song on the album, actually. I think it's a complete waste of space. They should have taken it off.
Gypsy Road.
Bruce Dickinson rates this. Nice melody. Bit dull, really. It's alright. Some people really like it. Okay.
Not completely lame, but fairly lame.
Fair lame. Next song.
Dive, dive, dive.
Dive, dive, dive is as rude as it sounds. It is smutty Viz type stuff. That's the context you have to put this album in. It goes with his novels. The Adventures of Lord Iffy Boat Race, which are kind of Viz inspired novels. That's the context you have to put it in. I think the most interesting thing about this song is actually, strangely, the video. This thing about having this submarine in all his music videos, which was kind of cool. I kind of like that. There's this submarine always there, which is sort of representing escapism. Or is this escapism? Is that the problem? Really? There's no escapism because it's surface music. It's driving the car on a summer's day music.
All the young dudes.
All the young dudes. Cover version. I remember this in the chart. I probably saw this every week on the chart show. It's All the Young Dudes. It's almost exactly the same as the Mott the Hoople Bowie Bend original, and it was a big hit, obviously, because it's a good song and it's well made. That's it. Interestingly, the origins of this album actually go back to 1987 when he did a Prince's Trust concert with a few different people, including Yannick Gers, and they play. All the young dudes get by with a little help from my friends and something else. And that was the seed of go and do that. So that's why they did all the young dudes.
Lickin The Gun.
I suppose this is the Aerosmith song. To me, it sounds just as good as Aerosmith. Maybe Aerosmith fans will be like, "Oh no!"
Actually, I thought this was a bit of fun.
Oh, that's still new.
Yeah, but this was actually a bit of fun.
I actually found it fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't. You say Aerosmith. I wouldn't find it out of place on maybe a Guns N' Roses record.
Yeah.
Maybe Use Illusion 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them tracks.
Track 9.
Zulu Lulu.
Is this the Stone song? This might be the Stone song.
Possibly. I mean, again, I reckon this could quite easily sound like a Guns N' Roses record.
Yeah, it could. Finally.
No lie.
I like the lyrics. This one reminds me maybe of Def Leppard, that kind of thing, because the chanting chorus. For me, this is a little bit of a step up. Not enough to redeem the album, but a little bit of a step up.
I think you think that because there's a bit of experimentation in there. It's quite long.
Yeah, there's a whole jam section with some guitar noises, although not a lot goes on.
Yeah, because the rhythm section is really
Banal.
boring.
Really, but I know. It's shocking, isn't it?
So it would be better without the rhythm section on there.
Yeah, just the guitar noises. But I mean, I'm not a fan of Yannick either, to be honest. But we won't go there.
Yeah, I agree. Nah.
Yeah, my opinion is that, of course, he didn't use Bring Your Daughters to Slaughter. I think if you took off 3 of the weakest songs, although we disagree on what the weakest songs are, replaced it with Bring Your Daughter, and there was a B-side called Ballad of Mutt, which was like a pastiche blues thing. Whilst that's not fantastic, it would have given it a bit more of energy and something else rather than just being a bit less straight down the line. Okay, so last week we gave Nevermind 4 eggs, so forget that. Start again. Okay, that was too many eggs. We've only got 3 eggs. Okay, so we can't, I'm going to give this 2 eggs.
A couple of eggs.
A couple of eggs. I think 2 eggs is about right. Because it succeeds in what it does. It's just as good as everything else at the time. It is not supposed to be taken seriously. The problem is, of course, 24 years later, here we are, reviewing it. That wasn't its intention, but that's what we're doing.
I'm going to give it 2 eggs also.
2 eggs.
So it's a couple of eggs album.
Couple of eggs album.
A fairly large omelette, 1/4 pan of scrambled egg. There you have it.
Yep, that's Tattoo Millionaire by Bruce Dickinson.
Yeah.
Join us next week for Balls to Picasso. Give us some likes. See you soon. Cheers!
Be sure to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.